Hello, happy Monday, and I thought that, or whenever you get to watch it, but for me today it's Monday, and I thought it's a really good day to talk about how can you make your career more satisfying. Usually Monday is the day where we have the most regrets about life choices. And I've already shared one live earlier about productivity, how being focused and in your lane is one of the key to increase this job satisfaction. And today comes the second component, which is being able to have uncomfortable conversations that we know we should have. And initially I named this live having difficult conversations, and I think in a couple of reels before that I also used this word difficult. But actually today, as I was reflecting on what I want to say to you today, I was thinking that using this word difficult already gives judgment. Then when you think, oh, it's difficult, like I can't do it, it kind of add to this anxiety, or it makes it even harder than it has to be. So that's why I chose the word uncomfortable, because I think that it takes away some of the gravity that comes with the word difficult, but it acknowledges that these conversations are uncomfortable, and this discomfort is usually one of the main reasons we are not having this conversation, like negotiating our raise, our salary, or giving feedback, responding to hurtful feedback, speaking up about our work, talking that, acknowledging that someone took credit for our work. So challenging the deadlines, right? So the discomfort that it comes is usually what makes us avoid those conversations. So, but as the title of this live suggests, I've seen it firsthand in so many different situations that actually having these conversations that we know we want to have but feel uncomfortable with is really the key to move your career forward, to be happier at work, and they're really worth having. But that's something that you already know. So if you were like, well, cool, Agatha, I already know that. Thanks, Captain Obvious. We're not there. We're going a little deeper here. So, as I was saying in some previous reels recently, I bring up this book, Crucial Conversation, that I read a year ago, because one of these key messages that it tells was that in case of these uncomfortable or crucial conversations, if we don't address them, we either talk them out, so we actually address them, talk about this issue, or we act them out. So the feeling of hurt, of being not appreciated, overlooked, or feeling of unfairness doesn't really go away anywhere. We just, shove it in and don't address it. But this sort of resentment will be showing up in how we approach this person, how we approach our work. So this would be this filter through which we see this person. And I'm bringing an example of a book, but I think that's something that we intuitively know, even if we haven't put it into words ourselves. That's something that we can intuitively feel ourselves, that's how it works. That when someone has underappreciated us in the past, then their further actions we would kind of see with this filter, with this lens. And even though I bring this book a lot lately because I really like this phrase, and I really hope that I came up with it, but I didn't, I have seen it firsthand myself. And today I actually wanted to share my personal experience, because you can read the book yourself. So and these were two situations where I actually had these conversations and they all led to positive outcomes, albeit very different. And I want to share some tips on how to prepare. So today would be just like a little sharing my story and how I approached it, to give some inspiration to you. But also maybe you have seen that I'm organizing. Sorry, I'm looking at myself and I just look at my hair. I'm still not used to looking at myself in camera. And so this live today, this story will be about like how I approach it, to give you some inspiration, how would you can take away to your work conversations that are overdue, but you can only get better when you practice. So maybe you have seen that I'm organizing a in real life event in Berlin called Speak Up Lab, when we actually get to practice these conversations with some role playing in a supportive environment and learn from one another. I will be also doing an online version over Google Meet, and I will share all the details in the coming days because I haven't set the date yet, but there will be also online version if you're not in Berlin. But to the main topic. So how I tackled this uncomfortable conversations and why I really recommended you to too. So one of the, I would say even the most career defining moment in my 10-year career was actually the very beginning of it, when I was an intern in one of the, probably the most recognizable German beauty brand in Hamburg. I was there an intern in e-commerce sales. It was a very interesting time because I was the only foreigner on the entire, it's an international company, but I was in a German team. I didn't speak that well German. I was very self-conscious about German. And I was the only foreigner on the floor. So, and I was also the youngest and I was the intern. So very, very interesting experience. And this was a 6-month internship. And after 3 months, I had a midterm review. So, I was straight after university. I needed to do internship abroad to get my diploma at Warsaw School of Economics. And I was there in my midterm review. And I've always been one of those like go-getters. Like I've been doing so much hard work, really doing my best. I really wanted to stay back then. I really wanted to stay in corporate, and even working for this one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Like I was really doing my best and really putting a lot of effort. And so when I had my midterm review, I was sure it will be raving. I thought that maybe there would be some things that I can improve, right? Obviously, there's always something you can improve, but I thought it will be overwhelmingly positive. It wasn't. It actually wasn't. So my manager was a first-time manager. So he was, a few years older than me. He didn't have any managerial experience before, and he was hired here, and I was his first, not really mentee, but he was the first, I was the first person he managed. And he based his midterm review on almost an hour, or 45 minutes or an hour, not saying about anything good that I met. Like there was not really compliment, there was no appreciation for whatever I did. He didn't mention any of my achievements, any of my accolades. What he did is he based his entire feedback session about one, in German we will say Kleinigkeit, like this small thing that I didn't write executive summary in front of the email to his boss, and this was lost my, this was this project could have been a chance for me to be more visible in this company, this corporate, but I've lost it, and how many people would have this, it was I was literally sitting there being what's going on? And first of all, let's acknowledge that this was a very shit feedback. This was not feedback at all. And how people who are new to managing people have zero support on actually how to talk to other people, manage people, is a different story that we'll keep out of today's life for today. But I was honestly shocked. The good thing was that because he talked so much, I didn't have a chance to give my part of feedback because he talked so much about this one situation, about blah 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 blah. And that was actually a good thing because I honestly didn't know what to say. I was close to crying, and I'm not a crier. Like, I very rarely cry. Or at least back then, I very rarely cried. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I literally, like, after I left the session, I went somewhere, like, to the bathroom to cry because I was like, what just happened? Like, I felt so underappreciated. It was like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like, how did it happen? Like, I've done all this hard work. Like, I've been really doing my freaking best after I have moved to the city abroad. Like, I moved to Hamburg. I'm from Poland. Like, I was changing apartments because I couldn't find an affordable one. I was changing apartments 4 times in 6 months, like, doing my master thesis. And yet I was doing so much. Like, you know, trying to speak German, even though it came difficult for me. Like I mentioned, I had to work twice as hard because my German wasn't that good and everyone spoke German. So I felt really, like, underappreciated for everything that I was doing. And my initial reaction was, you know, screw you. Screw you guys, I'm going home. And it was like, you know what, if you don't, and again, it was like 8 years ago. And my initial reaction was, you know what, like, I'm just gonna do bare minimum. If I'm doing so much and I'm underappreciated, that I'm just gonna do bare minimum and enjoy my time in Hamburg. It's a beautiful city. And it was like summertime or like early autumn. I'm just gonna have a good time. But then after this initial reaction was quite serendipitously, by accident, I heard about something from my yoga teacher, which is called a non-violent communication, which is basically a kind of framework or a way of having conversation that is based on observation, facts, and your feelings, and not about accusing the other person. And it's like a way to dissolve conflicts. And I was like, you know what? I can always give my bare minimum. But I felt like I want, for a change, respond differently. So I learned more about this NVC, nonviolent communication, which is like a 4-step process where this is like this message from I. So the kind of template of how to use NVC is like, when this and this happened, I felt this and this, and because your need, then I would like to, and some resolution of the problem. And so when I said like this, like, when you based your feedback entirely on this one situation, I felt underappreciated, and like all of my accolades didn't matter. That's why I would like to, you know, to make this feedback more whatever. I don't remember what I exactly said. So this sounds slightly artificial if you're not used to it, or if you're outside of therapist room. So I obviously adapted it, but what was the core of this message was that I said how I felt. I first stated the fact. So the fact was not that you're a shit manager, that this feedback was shit, like this is judgment. What I said was stating the fact. So when you base the feedback only on this one situation, not taking into account my achievements, my contributions, then I felt. So it was nothing about him, nothing. And that's kind of the core, because we're not accusing the other person, and that's what helps it. So I spent the entire weekend practicing it, really, because the feedback was on Friday, and kind of like the follow-up was supposed to be on Monday, and I literally spent an entire weekend. I mean, I've done other things, but majority of the weekend practicing this, using this nonviolent communication, because I had so much resentment for it that I really needed to practice it to not go into my default mode, which was, you know, like, shut up, I'm just gonna do bare minimum. And And I practiced, I wrote it down, like what I want to say, I rewritten it, did some breathing exercises, like I said, I was doing a lot of yoga and meditation, still do. And the end result was that, like, much better than I thought. I said, with using my NVC framework, what I wanted to say, so how I felt and how I would like to proceed. And he was shocked, but in like a positive way, because, you know, I didn't attack him, so he didn't have the need to be defensive. And he was actually grateful and thanked me for saying, like, hey, you know, like, I'm the first time manager, like, I know that you have so much potential, like, I see how talented and ambitious you are, and I wanted to like to kind of like push you to be more visible in this company, because that's how it works, and I thought that's the way, and thank you, because that helps me as a manager myself. And then we had like actual feedback call, where we talked in a more balanced way, like what can I improve, but also what are my strengths already. And for the remaining 3 months, we had great cooperation. I got an amazing recommendation letter and was even included in some talent pool for interns. Like, he recommended me for some position, like a junior position, and I didn't end up having, but the cooperation was great. And for the remaining 3 months, I could also use his experience as a more experienced colleague to work on some things that I could be, you know, like, more visible in the company in a way that's like, you know, not gross, and how to show up better in meetings. So this was great. And I know that if I didn't have this conversation, I would have spent the entire 3 months really resentful and just really hating my time there. So this was one where, you know, it's like a textbook, like I said, NVC, and it was great, and both parties benefited from it. And another example, because, you know, I also don't want to give you the impression that it will always result in how you want it to result. So another part of this, how to prepare for this conversation, like the first one that I said, is practicing those non-accusatory frameworks. NVC is a great one. And another one is like this non-attachment to the result. And I know it sounds stupid, because if you're like, I want to talk about getting a raise, like, if I don't get a raise, like, how can I not be attached to a result, you know? So I understand it. But what I mean by this is that when you go to these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, with the attitude, it's my way or highway, then it's never gonna work. Then you only look at like 2 possible outcomes. Either I get what I want or I don't get what I want. And there is still a lot of space where maybe you won't get what you exactly want now, but you can still improve your situation somehow and make a basis for the next conversation, right? So maybe you won't get a full raise now, but you will have a better understanding what you have to do and agree on the goals to have this salary increase, for example, in 3 months. Or maybe you don't get this exact salary raise now, but you can get a learning budget to learn something that you would find extremely useful to get that promotion or to get a different job having this skill set. So this is what I mean with this non-attachment to result, more as being open and really listening to the other side as well. It's like, it's not a non-violent communication if you go there, say your part, and then be like, we're only doing it my way. You know, so, and even if you don't have this experience in working context, I'm pretty sure you must have had a similar situation in a personal life context, and I'm pretty sure you can say that it never went well if you said like, we're only doing it my way. and it's similar in the professional context as well. And the second story that I had is that, and this is why I bring this not being attached to the end result or to the exact end result, is that, you know, I also use this NVC framework in a different workplace, in a different situation, where I worked for one of the consulting companies that I had so much work. It was during COVID, and there were companies where people had to, where a lot of employees were laid off, unfortunately. I worked for a company that was building digital solutions, so we actually had a lot of work, right, for those companies, and this was during pandemic, like I said. So I don't remember how many projects I had at this time, but I was alone. We had a very little German team, and my other colleague left, and I had so much work. Like it was really, really hard. Like it was really, really difficult to handle that. A lot of projects, a lot of expectations. And I talked with my manager that, hey, this is like, also using this NVC, also talking about facts, like that I have that many projects, and then I find it difficult. Like I don't have any time for, like really upskilling or really giving like high quality advice because I'm jumping from one call to another. I don't remember the exact background, but I was basically, like non-accusatory saying that this is too much and I need some projects, some responsibilities taken away from me. Because this was really, really a lot. And my manager, like, he didn't laugh at me, but he really disregarded it. Like, it was almost laughing at it that how would you say? It's not like I'm overdoing it. I'm overreacting. He didn't use the word overreacting, but it was kind of like along the lines that I'm overreacting. It's not that much. Like, look at this project. It's not really that much. Like, really disregarding like everything that I was saying. And to me, it was, and there was like nothing. Like, like I tried giving a couple of potential solutions or looking for a middle way. Like, he was unwelcome to accommodate any of that. And so exactly after this conversation, I was like, well, okay, then I see no other way. Like, I've done what I was supposed to do, but I see no other way than to just look for another job. And I think that one that I applied to like 5 or 10 minutes after the conversation was the one I got 12,000 euro per year more, or 15,000 euro more for the same job that I did. So, I ended up, and that's what I'm saying about this different result. Like, I did my part, I said what I wanted to say, and after this conversation, it became clear to me that I can either stick here being resentful that I literally said, and it was difficult for me to acknowledge that this is too much, that I'm really not able to meet all the expectations that you have for me, and I was literally almost left off. So I was like, I can either stay here resentful and just, that affect my overall life satisfaction, or I can look for a different solution, which in that case was like, okay, if this is my manager and he really is not listening, like I tried another, because this was like a second time that I also brought it up, which is another thing that I wanted to add to this entire preparing for this conversation, is that you need to prime the other person that this is what you're gonna talk to. So I didn't say it when I was introducing the situation, but I'm adding this extra background now. So before I had this conversation with him, I told him, this is what I want to talk about, that I want to talk about my workload and about my project. And also I brought up before in some conversations that I am feeling overwhelmed. Like, I was also hinting that. So it wasn't that, and that's also a really good tip if you're approaching salary increases. If you're just going through this conversation being like, I want to have a salary increase without no prior hinting on it, this can make it much, much less effective. So I did prime him, like I did mention this a couple of times before we had this conversation, this one-on-one, only on this topic. So I was like, okay, like I did what I feel like I've exhausted my option in this company. So what stays for me is actually look for a different one. And this was also like a great outcome for me, right? Because I was doing the same, less projects, but I got much more money for that. So in the end, even though this conversation didn't end as I wanted it to, and I of course was not really resentful. I was I'm lacking words today. Like I would have wanted to stay there. Like I would have wanted him to listen and to do something about my workload. Like maybe look for some interim support, some freelancers, whatever, to keep the employees that they have. But they didn't. So of course, it was. I wasn't quite happy, but I was like, okay, well, what do I have to do? After all, I need to take care of myself first. So as you can see, both of those conversations, and of course I had many more, but I wanted to give this two different examples to kind of show that if I didn't have this conversation, I would have been much more resentful, much more unhappy. And, even in the second situation, if, I could have just straight away started looking for another job before having this conversation. But knowing that I did my part, or how I like to say, cleaned my side of the street, already gives me this more confidence and this more peace of mind, being like, what, I've done my part. Because also, changing a job in between the pandemic and being in this probationary period where you can be kicked out like this with 2 weeks is also some sort of risk. Right? So to me, knowing that, like I cannot control what they do, but I can control what I do, and I can respond to it in a more mature way is something that gives me a lot of sense of like this agency and being like proud of myself as well. So that's what I wanted to share today as some sort of inspiration on how to have these uncomfortable conversations, and kind of like the key takeaways when you have them is to prime this person, so kind of prepare this person that this is a sort of conversation that will happen, so that they're not like out of the blue surprised. Another tip is this learning, for example, this nonviolent communication framework. So focusing on your observation and fact and not making it accusatory, taking some deep breaths, practicing before. And the third tip is this non-attachment to the results. So really being open to listening to the other person. It's not about you talking. It's about having this conversation. So really listening to what the other person can suggest and finding like a middle way. And sometimes you won't find a middle way, but that's also an information for you on what can you do. And if that kind of inspired you to make a change and actually have one of those uncomfortable conversations that you are long overdue, like negotiating salary, having feedback, giving feedback, speaking up about your work, asking for extra learning budget, asking to go to some cool conference, or changing your role, or discussing your workload so that it's more manageable, then I highly, highly invite you to the Speak Up Lab, where we would get the chance to practice either in real life or online. And the great thing about it is as well that not only do you have time to practice, but also you can learn from other people who bring their situations. Like I curate this space, so to say, so we come from similar backgrounds, so we can all learn from different situations and from one another. So you're very welcome, and that's it for today. I hope you find it useful. Let me know what you think, and I see you next time. I get so many of those informations here that I need to stop. So sorry for this weird ending. See ya.